Welcome, dear friends, to another session of coming from Iranian Baha'is for Racial Justice from our team, Barbara Talley, Hoda Hosseini, and myself. This is a session entitled From Otherness to Oneness. So in this session, dear friends, we have a very honored and special guest, Mr. Van Gilmer. And before we get into that, we will have an invocation. Thank you so much.
Beauty.
Wow.
Wow.
Always, all I can say is wow.
Yeah.
Truly breathtaking. And thank you so much for making that a reality. So without any further ado, dear friends, I would like and have the privilege to introduce Mr. Van Gilmer. I actually have 2 pages of an introduction because he is that special. So he's saying, please, Esson, don't do it, but I am. So, dear friends, without any further ado, Mr. Van Gilmer is a renowned soloist, a composer, a director. He is the original organizer and director of the 80-member Baha'i gospel choir that made its first debut appearance before a standing room only audience in the Ramada Hotel ballroom during the Second Baha'i World Congress, held in New York City in 1992. Since then, he has directed several Baha'i choirs, including a 100-member Baha'i choir that toured Western Europe in 2004. Mr. Van Gilmer produced his first CD from that tour entitled The Baha'i Gospel Choir Live in Luxembourg. Van is a native of Greensboro, North Carolina, and graduated from the North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University with a BS in architectural engineering. During that early period, he was also directly involved in the sit-ins of the 1960s to remove barriers of segregation in the United States. After 37 years of federal civilian service in a variety of engineering and management positions, during his federal employment, he appointed the Director of Equal Employment Opportunity, where he also represented Navy Department EEO directors for the Northeast of the United States and Europe. He was presented with the Civilian Meritorious Award and medal by the United States Navy Department for his outstanding service and retired from federal service in 2004. For the past 9 years, Mr. Gilmore has been the music director at the Baha'i House of Worship for the North American continent, located in Wilmette. He has toured throughout Europe, the United States, and the Caribbean, and has appeared twice at Carnegie Hall. In 2011, Mr. Van Gilmer took a Baha'i gospel choir to sing for the 50th anniversary of the Baha'i faith in Ethiopia. Mr. Van Gilmer has been a Baha'i for now over 50 years and has served on a variety of Baha'i administrative and appointed bodies, including the National Race Unity and National Persian American Affairs Committees. Mr. Gilmer was invited by the Interfaith Conference of Metropolitan Washington, D.C. to direct a 200-voice combined choir for their 26th annual Interfaith Conference held at the Washington Hebrew Congregation. He currently is planning for the 9th annual Baha'i Choral Festival, which he founded under the auspices of the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States, and that took place. He's also the recipient of the Independent Music Awards, Best Gospel Song for 2005, and Van is a member of the American Society of Choral Directors and is listed in the Who's Who Registry and Global Network for Outstanding Professionals. And dear friends, that's just page 1.
Oh, please.
So I just wanted to share just a few of his awards. Truly, Mr. Van Gilmer is an outstanding individual in his profession, in his life, and in his service. So I just wanted to share just a few of his awards that he has been gifted. He has received the award, the Gold Prize, at the Johannes Brahms International Choral Festival in Germany. In 2001, recipient, the Best Song and the Best Gospel Song for My God, My Adored One. In the Independent Music Awards in 2006, he has been honored with an invitation from the Interfaith Conference of Metropolitan Washington, D.C. to direct a 200-voice combined choir for their 26th annual concert held at Washington Hebrew Congregation. He has also had a series of publication works, as well as a series of different career accomplishments. Dear friends, without any further ado, please give a warm welcome to Mr. Van Gilmer. It is our distinct honor and great pleasure to have him in our presence. Thank you so much. Truly, thank you.
Thank you so much, Hassan. It's just great to be here. I never have to sit through a long introduction like that. And it's in some ways embarrassing, and in other ways, it makes me think about how long the journey has been. The journey as a Baha'i, the journey as an African American in the United States, the journey as now a resident in a community that has almost nobody of color. And that's the most recent of the challenges in my personal life, is to step out of the comfort many years ago of a Black community, a segregated Black community in America. And then the things I never write down are the many times that I, as well as I'm sure many other African Americans, became the first one to do something. I was the first Black engineer in my naval office, the first person to live in a complex of apartments just outside of Washington, D.C. It couldn't happen until the Civil Rights Open Housing Act of 1968. So I didn't know. And these are the kinds of things that many of us have had to go through that aren't things we talk about. But I can remember as a young man going to the Washington, D.C. area to work. And then I wanted to find a place to live. And I couldn't, because the Navy Department would normally house its new engineers among community. And when the community found out this was a Black man, there was nowhere for me to live. And so we had to hunt around for a Black family in Southern Maryland who would allow me to stay in their house. And I stayed in their house. I rented a room in their house for several months before the passing of the 1968 Fair Housing Law, which now meant that housing must be open to African Americans. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'll jump through what I have here so that we can talk a little maybe. So tell me if you're seeing why racial justice matters to me. On full screen. Are you able to see that?
We see it.
Okay. So I when I looked at that title, I said, and why it should matter to you. It really should matter to all of us. As Baha'is, we found just recently how important race is in this country. Again, I mean, we've done it many times, but look at what the House of Justice said. as the conscience of its citizenry has stirred, creating possibilities for marked social change. It holds significance not only for the destiny of America anticipated in the sacred writings, but also for the mission entrusted to your community. So this is a historic moment. It's a time in America, it's a time in the Baha'i world that the House of Justice wrote just to us here in America to say this. And I will just run through this because I know you're familiar with this paragraph that I just love out of that letter from the 22nd of July from the House of Justice. Look, I put the first thing, I call it the love paragraph. They said the power to transform the world is affected by love. And then look how many more times they mentioned it. Love originating from relationships with the divine. Love ablaze among the members of the community. Love ignited by the word of God is disseminated by enkindled souls through intimate conversations. And I hope that today we can have some of these intimate conversations. And I'm going to kind of jump through in order to get to a point where we can just talk to each other. They say through intimate conversations that create new susceptibilities in human hearts, open minds, and moral persuasion, and loosen the hold of biased norms and social systems so that they can gradually take on a new form in keeping with the requirements of, look at this, humanity's age of maturity. So this must be the time. They've already said this is a very important time. They're saying humanity is now at the age that we should be able to get this done. You are the channels for this divine love. Not just me, all of us. Let it flow through you to all who cross your path. Infuse it into every neighborhood and social space. Move to build capacity. There can be no rest until the destined outcome is achieved. So that's another reason I feel such urgency to our being able to talk about this. So I'm going to ask you these questions, and I want everybody to really just think about this in yourself. Do I know somebody that I feel comfortable talking to who is of my own race? Do I have someone of another race that I could have this conversation with? Do I ever have this conversation with my family? Am I comfortable having this conversation? You know, the goal is for us to have an intimate conversation. How often do you have this conversation with someone who is African American? I ask how often, but is it daily? Is it weekly? Is it monthly? Is it maybe at a feast? Maybe at an assembly meeting? Do you have a conversation with other persons of color? I ask this because these days, when we talk about African Americans in America, it now has all of these Asian, indigenous, others, Hispanics, and you know that we can also say Iranians. We can say immigrants. We're talking. We're limited really to talking about race, white and black, but we've added a number of other things. And these days, when we have the conversation, it often becomes something tied to my immigrant status. So this is an important thing for us to think about. I'm going to run through this quickly because I really want to have conversation with you more than show you stuff. But you remember this from Shoghi Effendi. Well, why in the world did he write this about black people and white people? And look when it was. And we, ever since I've been a Baha'i, 55 years now, I've been studying this. So I don't want us to just study it. I want us to think about these words. For it says white people. And for those of you who are Persian, we now created another team. We say white people, but people who everybody else thinks are white. Though you might not have been white in America, when you came here, you looked to everybody else like you're white. If you came here and you were black, we'd have to talk about this over here because all this stuff would happen to you. But let's talk about this. Abandon their inherent and at times subconscious sense of superiority. Now, I don't think we should just read this, and maybe we can talk about this a little. Subconscious sense of superiority. How many people would ever say, the people who are white, who would ever say, I have a subconscious sense of superiority? Most of the people who are white in America, practically all, can't even tell if they're displaying a subconscious sense of superiority because it's something they grew up with. Correct their tendency of patronizing attitude. Patronizing attitude? What is that? How many times have you or people who are white actually done this and not known it? Unfortunately, nobody from over here is going to tell you. They're just going to be hurt. Every once in a while these days, you'll find somebody who's tired of being hurt and will actually say it and then hurt somebody's feelings over here. And then persuade black people in America of their intimate, spontaneous, and informal association with them through, keyword, genuineness of their intentions. Not acting, not playing like, but actually being genuine. So let's look over here. Here's where I used to concentrate over here. I used to say, this is what the white people have to do. This is the thing that's bothering me a lot now, the stuff that black people have to do. Because I have to do more than read this. I have to do more than read it. I got to try to figure out how I can do it. Listen to this one. Show by every means in their power the warmth of their response. We've learned to do this, but not necessarily sincerely, not with a genuine approach to it. Just, yes, ma'am. Yeah, oh, yes, you're right. Oh, honey, yes, that's right. The warmth of their response. That's not real warmth. I'm beginning to think about how can we do this? How can I do this? Their readiness to forget the past. This is the hardest one. And I said this in a presentation a night ago, not 2 nights ago. And this one got all the attention because this is the hardest for black people to do. And it doesn't, I'm sure this definition isn't, you don't look at history. And that's something we've been very good at, not looking at history. In America, we have even hidden history. We have even constructed a history that is false, and we've all learned it. So surely forgetting the past doesn't mean don't look at history. It means trying to forget all of this stuff. Look ahead. And then this suspicion out of this last one, their ability to wipe out every trace of suspicion that may linger in their hearts. This is most difficult for me these days. I never thought about myself being suspicious. Why wouldn't I think about that? Because I know all the things that have been done to me. All the things that have been done to me by white people. And anybody who looked like they were white did it to me. And why would I think that they're being genuine now? That all of a sudden they don't mean the stuff I always heard. So working on this for me is hard. This is difficult. This is extremely difficult. And for the longest, I thought Black people in America kind of had it easy. Shoghi Effendi let us off. He didn't. So I'm going to move on. And I think this is the way we need to study this. Not just read the sentence. See, I took the sentences and broke them down to just be these few words. Tried to highlight a few of those words. That's the way we need to start looking at it. I'm going to run through this. This follows that section about what Blacks should do and what whites should do. When you look at this side, when you look at what comes up here, these are the things that Shoghi Effendi says we all must have. So the first one he says is love, but he didn't just say love. He has an adjective to it. Extreme love. Extreme love, whatever that means. Now I'm going to run through all the others without just talking about them. Patience, but what kind of patience? Genuine patience. Humility, my true humility, not pretend. Tact, initiative, wisdom, effort. But look at the description of what they are. We'll go on. The sentence reads, we have to have all that, and that will succeed in blotting out the stain which this patent evil, and when he says patent evil, he's talking about racism. Racism in America. He wrote it to us, racism in America has left on the fair name of their common country. Wow. So what do? I'll put these up, we'll talk about them later. What must we do? Understand that there is a problem. How many times now do you talk to somebody, a friend, even a Baha'i friend, who says, I don't know why we keep talking about race, which is one human family. I'll tell you some more about that. I served on the National Persian American Affairs Committee for a few years, quite a few years actually. And I'll tell you how understanding that problem was very difficult. Even the problem between Americans and these newly arrived immigrants who are our Baha'i brothers and sisters from Iran. Let's examine ourselves first. Before we start looking at somebody else saying, you know, that person does this or that person didn't do that, an inward look is very necessary. I think all these years I've lived, I'm thinking more about these things. Develop a personal action plan. I don't know how many of you, I don't think you have to write something down. Just decide something you're going to do. You know, I asked that question earlier. Do you even have a conversation, either in your family or in your community, about race. Well, maybe this is a time to say, I'm going to do that. I'm going to try that with somebody. Start with something that's very doable. Don't even think about something that's so hard to do you won't achieve it. Review your progress regularly and be determined to do better. Here's the promise. I've been talking about it all along. It comes from Abdu'l-Baha. He says, for the accomplishment of unity between the colored and whites will be the assurance of the world's peace. In my words, if we get this right, everything else is going to be easy to solve if we can get this right. Unity between the colored and the whites will be the assurance of the world's peace. It comes from Abdu'l-Baha. So I rushed through so we can talk with each other. So I'm going to stop sharing. Now, here we are, face to face. Let us have some conversation about this. Let us have some intimate conversation about this. Who wants to start? Well, let me say this. We start. I didn't know you were going to start with that "In This Day, Baha'u'llah," which was sung in 1992 at the Baha'i World Congress. Do you know that in that year, in 1992, we started learning there was music being written, but it wasn't until, I would say, July, that I got a call from the Baha'i National Office from a person there, an African American who was on the staff there, who said, Van, the House of Justice has asked for there to be gospel music from Americans of African descent at the second Baha'i World Congress. Well, I hardly flinched because I'm thinking, okay, well, where are we going to get that? How are we going to do some gospel music? And so she said, we're going to, we have the list. We have the list here at the national office of African Americans. And we're going to go through and try to pick out the people we know that sing. And they went through the Baha'i national list and picked out Black people that they thought sang. And they had about 100 of them. So meanwhile, they were telling me so that I would think about trying to write something. Okay, now keep in mind, in America, all the music so far had been Christian hymns, sounding music, folk kind of music, but nothing at all from the experience of the Americans of African descent. Also, we weren't sure what that would look like. In the South, it had already begun, but it was only shared in the summer and winter schools in the South. Every once in a while, somebody would know a song and would sing it. It was some of those very, very early songs, but one included a song that came out of there, and that was We are soldiers in God's army. We got to stop. Well, that's a Christian song. It's a song, we are soldiers in the army. We got to stop and something. We got to hold up the bloodstained banner. We got to hold it up until we die. We took the words and put in some Baha'i words. And then we decided we would talk about the Bab, Baha'u'llah, Abdul Baha, then we are soldiers, and then you are a soldier in God's army. We were singing that, but not much. It would have to be in the Black South, where people already knew the Christian song. And all they had to do was just get an idea of how the words were going to change. We had another song that we sang as a brand new Baha'i. I went to Frogmore. Frogmore is on the coast. It was scary. It's in South Carolina. To me, I had never seen gray moss hanging out of trees. And we had to go through that to get to this little camp. And it was Frogmore. And that's where there were the Baha'i School for the South at Frogmore. And I got there and they sang Baha'u'llah is the glory of God. Baha'u'llah. That song was Let Us Break Bread Together on Our Knees, sung at Easter time for sure in the Black community. But if all the Black Baha'is, and there weren't that many, they knew that song. This was this thing that was started drawing us to the faith. The Baha'is were different. The Persian Baha'is, very few. They weren't people who left Iran because of the regime. They were people who had come to this country. One of them still living. His name is Faridun Jalali. He became a teacher at North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University. Historically Black. Persian. We didn't even know what, nobody else knew what Persians were. I knew because I was becoming acquainted with the Baha'is. And there were Persians who were in that community. He was in the Baha'i community. He taught electrical engineering. So he was in the building that I was in all the time in my courses, my electrical course, my engineering courses were in that building. So after I met him and heard just a little bit about the faith, I started dropping by his office to ask him a question. So what do Baha'is believe about this, about that? He just spent, this is a professor of engineering, and I'm a student that's not his student. And I'm in there asking questions about religion. And he's got students, engineering, electrical engineering students that are waiting for me to come out so they can ask him questions about their training. And and he'd give me a book. I hadn't even thought I was going to tell you this, but I'm telling you this because in my heart, in my early life, was this Persian Baha'i who cared about me, who answered every question I had. And we spent all kinds of time together. How could I forget that? Anyway, it was it was him that made sure that we got to meet the few Black Baha'is in the South. We went all the way, we drove all the way to Greenville, South Carolina, to meet Smitty, William Smith of Race Amity, to meet Steve, there were a few Baha'is there and a few Black Baha'is. So we had to go that far from North Carolina, Greensboro, North Carolina, about nearly 2-hour drive to meet somebody of color who would also become Baha'is. It was unbelievable because we left the Black community. I left my church. I left my Baptist church to go with a Persian man, a Black woman, Adrienne Gordon, a young Black woman who had become a Baha'i. Charles Bullock and I became Baha'is within 9 days of each other. We both were in North Carolina A&T. So you see how long we've known each other. But we would go to South Carolina and spend the night. We'd spend a whole day. We either go early in the morning, stay all day long. It was our way of seeing a new religion that came from Iran that wasn't talking about Christ. That was a big leap. That was a big leap. Baha'u'llah? Baha'u'llah? Every Persian that I met during that time was like that. They were with us. They were with us. So I thought, if I can live this out, if I can be a Baha'i and stay a Baha'i, because I had a problem with Baha'u'llah. I just couldn't see replacing Christ with Baha'u'llah. But I loved everything he said. So I said to myself, I'll follow. I'll try to follow. Because he says all the things I believe. He said everything I believe. I couldn't believe it. Out of Iran, Baha'u'llah, he says all the things I believe. And he said things that were different from all the things I had been taught. If I could stay with that, if I could learn to love him, like obviously the Baha'is loved him, then I'd have no problem. I didn't know that I would remain a Baha'i. I didn't know that I would even have a discussion like this with any of you now. I didn't know that we would have the challenges of America and life in America, where in my day, a policeman probably wouldn't dare shoot me if I happened to come out of my segregated community, because we had to come out to go to the grocery store. We had to come out to buy clothes. We had to come out to get up to buy a car. We were always in a black community, but we had to come into white world to do anything. I had no clue that 50 years later, African Americans can be shot without even a thought, killed without even a thought. And we could be talking about race in America and say, I think we just ought to just look forward, forget. I had nothing to do with that in the past, and yet we haven't fixed what Baha'u'llah told us a long time ago, what Abdul Baha spent his whole year practically in America showing the American Baha'is. He said, do you realize the Baha'i faith is not white? The Baha'i faith includes everybody. And he had to keep doing it everywhere he went. You know all the stories. He just did it. And I think we figured out this is not a peace movement. This is a movement of the heart, closer to God. So I hadn't planned to tell you any of that, but I'm going to stop and just let us chat a bit.
I want to be the first to thank you so much for sharing what you did just now, that you weren't planning, because this is the work of the heart. And it means a lot what you share. I see you on so many Zooms, especially over the past year, because of the pandemic having been something that happened. So at least, 10, 12 race Zooms on race. And Van, you're in so many spaces and you have been in the struggle for so long. And your voice needs to be heard. And this is the very reason we have these conversations, centering it on the voice of the pupil of the eye. As you said earlier, I took a few notes. You says, the assurance of world peace is the coming together of black and white in America. Mm-hmm. And the Guardian adds onto it. He says, the peace and tranquility of the world depends on one thing, coming together of black and white in America. But in order for that to begin, the African American needs to be represented. So he may express his viewpoint, so we may understand it, so we may reach across this chasm. And so I want to share that. I want to answer some of these questions that you've posed, and I want to be true.
Okay.
And I just want to share that this is a journey. We all have been on a different journey. Some of us got on this road a long time ago, but I still find I still make huge mistakes. I mean well, my heart is good, I read the writings, I focus, I'm careful, I'm cognizant, I've listened to what may be wounding and uncomfortable for people of African descent to hear in our Baha'i communities, but I still make these mistakes because I don't live at race. I'm not impacted. It's not my social reality. But I want to go back in time. When I first came to America, I quickly realized that there was two Americas, one white, one black, very separate, very unequal, and very hostile. And as an Iranian Baha'i, I had a totally different picture in my head, even the Baha'i community was. I thought it was a very kumbaya, love everybody, very connected and very loving. But when I first arrived, I was very fortunate. My African American friend in the first community I came to, his name was John Sneed. I don't know if you remember him. Beautiful voice. He passed away. I was very fortunate. He was in our community. Him and his wife Beverly and his 2 kids. And we were in a meeting, and he says, Hoda, why, we don't have race unity in the Baha'i community. And I was one of those same Baha'is, Iranian Baha'is, who still say, we don't have racism. We don't have attitudes of racial prejudice in the Baha'i community. What are you talking about? I thought he was a covenant breaker. I just want to say where I was. I have to start with where I was, because you're going to constantly have suspicion and mistrust. But there's this hope we could still, by learning and listening to people of African descent, maybe we can get further on this road. So do I know somebody that I feel comfortable talking to is of my own ethnicity as an Iranian? To be quite honest, I'm always challenged. Oh, Hoda, you think too much about race. Why don't you talk about the persecution of Baha'is in Iran? Why are you so focused? Blacks have it good. We made it. They can make it too. And it's not comfortable for me to have these conversations. But fortunately, there's Sohail's and there's my collaborator over here, Ehsan, that I can have these honest conversations with. Do I have someone of another, say a person of African descent that I can have these conversations with? I would have not been able to have these conversations had I not tried to be in it. Because, we live in 2 realities. If I live in a community where there's no diversity because of the way America is set up. The residential system is set up for you to be separate. Its schooling system is set up to be totally separate. So if I really wasn't a Baha'i, there'd be no reason. And I just want to say something and I'll stop. And I would love to hear other conversations. Oh, maybe I need to share. Do I have these conversations with my family? Absolutely, I do. My father was he's passed away. He was raised in Egypt. And one of the reasons I fight hard for this, promoting racial justice, because he really was a wonderful, deepened Baha'i. But he would say things that caused great cognitive dissonance in my mind. He was a wonderful Baha'i, but he would say racial things that was inappropriate, and I knew it, and it just really upset me and hurt me, because 2 notes that didn't work together. So I just wanted to say, am I comfortable? This is your next question. Am I comfortable having this conversation? Of course not. Of course, because I know, because of my privilege as a white-looking person, I have attitudes of superiority. I do interrupt people that are African descent. I constantly have to work on not jumping in, not making assumptions, not making stereotypes, not being afraid when I go someplace and I see a person of African descent when they're walking towards me, make sure that I don't. So I'm constantly working at it, and it's uncomfortable, but that's where the challenge is, because the challenge makes you change. So I'm done for now. Would love to hear other reflections.
And that was an incredible presentation, snapshotting the advent of divine justice and highlighting the duty that whites as well as Blacks have to take on internally and within their communities, and to have that level of transformation. It's so important, whether white, whether Black, Asian, regardless, to know what is your role, your purpose as such. I shared this insight. I shared it very privately with Hoda, and I wanted to share it with you, Van. This is an insight after meditating. when I was meditating on this aspect, let the white make a supreme effort, right? So I was meditating on this the other day, and I share this insight with you, and also to see how you reflect on it and learn from you. So I just will be very short. When I was younger, I played the game of chess, and in the game of chess, there are 8 pawns, there are 2 rooks, 2 knights, 2 bishops, a queen and a king. And as I was meditating, I was thinking about this, and I was thinking, in the Baha'i community, there are whites and Persians, and often in most communities, they're dominant. So I was thinking the role of the whites and Persians would be very similar to the role that the pawns have in the front. But their role is supportive. But the role of the minorities, namely the knight, the rook, and the bishop, namely the indigenous, the Native Americans, and the African Americans, they have a higher function and role. But they happen to be sitting at the back beside they're the generals. So they need the supportive line to support them for the advancement. And they cannot come out unless the supporters are there, or else what happens? They get taken out really quick and they get hurt. So they need the advancing line to support them in the advancement. So once the Native Americans or the African Americans sees that the Persian Americans and the whites are there to defend them, like how pawns do in the battle, then they can move hand in hand, moving, advancing together. And the queen and the king are the institutions of the cause, guiding the battle. So this is just an analogy, but it's to understand our role in the aspect of what is our role? Our role is to understand that as whites and Persians, we are there not only to conquer our own inner battles, to eradicate our own prejudices, and understanding that we are here to support, encourage, and nurture the minority element within our communities. Have that level of positive discrimination if we ever have an African American, Native American, any aspect, whether it's even a woman, there might be sometimes women are the minority, but any aspect, and raise and uplift them. And with love, and as you, dear Van, said, genuineness. It's a very important word, genuineness. So these are some reflections I share with you, and it was a beautiful presentation that you shared with us, and I appreciate it. So I go back to you, dear Van, and we also have a hand from Miss Sherry. So we go back to you, dear Van, and then we'll come to Sherry, please.
Well, I think our being able to, all of us being genuine in the way we approach each other. I suspect with my limited exposure over all of these years to Persian people, that one of the things I see is a culture, a very strong culture that, let me tell you, Handle the Cause, what was his name? I was having a lunch with him. A couple of us were having lunch.
Mahajer?
Mahajer, Dr. Mahajer. And this was maybe 3 decades ago. Anyway, we were having a lunch in Washington, D.C. And he said this to us. He said, you know, the Persians are the people who can really teach the Black people in America. He said the reason he thought this was first, Persians almost all have brown eyes. The same with Black people. They almost all have brown eyes. He said, so what doesn't get in their way, that doesn't get in the way of the relationship is this blue eye, this green eye that is associated with the master. So he said, so that's the first thing. And then he said, the second thing is Persians love hospitality. They love to have people come in for dinner. They love to have this. He said, they, and Black people also love to have people over. They love it. You know, in a Black community, even today, on a Sunday after church, if somebody were to visit somebody else, they would say, "Oh, won't you have dinner with us?" "Oh, yes, we're gonna make a place at the table." You know, always there's food. There's a way to feed. He said, those are only two things he mentioned: eye color and this hospitality. He said those things in both Black people of America and Persians should bring them together just like this. Now it wasn't happening that way, but we could see that it's very attracting. In the Washington D.C. area, we had a monthly Persian gathering. And of course, only people who went to that generally were Persian. And luckily, my wife and I would always be invited. So we were there, and it's all Persian, and the only other people who were not Persian were the spouses who happened to be white or not even generally Black, but white. And so there would be a single white person somewhere, the two of us, me and Cookie, and 200 to 300 Persians. Food, we eat. Sometimes it would even be in Farsi. You know, we wouldn't even know what was going on, but it almost didn't matter because they were accepting of us. Now, I don't know why that acceptance was there, but we felt it, and a lot of other people didn't. A lot of other people didn't, because they didn't even know this was going on. And they didn't understand how was it that Cookie and I would be invited and we could be there. But it was a wonderful, loving gathering. And finally, the community was told, you can't do that. You can't keep doing that. It's actually too Persian. we don't want you to do that every month unless everybody's invited. But I can see how we're so close and yet so far apart.
Yeah. Great reflections, dear Van. Great reflections. Let us go to our first question. Miss Sherry, I don't think I can.
Hi.
Please, you have the floor, Miss Sherry. Please.
Thank you so much. I love our friends. I'm so happy and privileged to be with you. Thank you for this, and thank you for having us all. I want to just tell you that one thing that Van showed amongst the quotations that you had on the screen, Van, it really has been with me for a very long time, that the only way to accomplish world peace is through this racial unity. Mm-hmm. And we know also, I think in the advent of divine justice, the Guardian has stated that the banner of world peace will be raised from America. Mm-hmm. So to me, we have the mandate. It's like given a job, like going to work and saying, today, this is what you have to do. So what do we do when we go to work and we are told to do this? We can't just, oh, you know what? Thank you. We're going to get fired. We're going to lose our job. We're going to starve. Like, we have to do this, one and all. If this is the obstacle to achieving world peace, I am so frustrated. I'm just really, for years now, honestly, like all of us, Persians, Chinese, white, black, all of us have to drop everything and do this so we can achieve world peace, you know? And I just don't know how I can make everyone understand such a huge, huge mandate given to this nation. I'm not American, I'm living here in Canada, but I want to do what in my front lawn for the past year, I've had a sign, end hate and racism, I have a dream. And there is a black hand and a white hand coming together. I've had it on my lawn. Like, I just don't know what to do, you know, to raise this awareness globally in the Baha'i community. So, but I love that quote that you put on, Van. I think we have been given that mandate. And honestly, as Baha'is, we have to do this. We have to help this nation rise to its call.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, in all of our spaces, this is also an advent of divine justice. In all of our spaces, whether public, whether private, whether young or old, whether black or white. This is a paragraph, I believe off the top of my head, it's paragraph 58. But in every single space, whether black or white, old or young, we have to bring up freedom from racial prejudices, whether it's in our administrative duties, whether it's in our spaces in the cluster, whether it's in our spaces in private or public, it's in our family life or in our occupations at work. We have a duty, as dear Sherry said, this is a spiritual mandate. Spiritual mandate we've been given to, if we do not do it as Baha'is, who else will do this? We have a hand. Let us go to dear Sohail John. Let me first spotlight you so we all can see you. There you go. Sohail John, you have the floor. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody, and I'm glad to be amongst you. And Van, thank you so much for helping everybody with this subject, the most important subject. I actually have a question from you, Van. My question is, you know, I'm married to a black woman, and to be honest with you, she hasn't complained as much about the American whites and challenges from them as she has from Persians. In your experience, where does your most challenge in the Baha'i community come from? Persians or regular whites?
No, I think it's for me, it's from whites.
Okay.
For me, it's from whites. Now, but you have to think about your community.
Yeah, that's true.
Your community is heavily Persian.
Yes.
Anywhere you have a black person with a heavily Persian community, they're going to often have things that will come up. Like you almost can't stop a Persian from talking about we love everybody, we're just one. You know, it's you know, I don't even see color. I mean, those are just common among Persians. The whole idea of one human family. You know, when I was on the National Persian American Affairs Committee, we could almost not even say Persian or Iranian when we were talking to them. They kept saying it's singling them out. I don't see why you would just say Baha'is. Why not just Baha'i? Why Persian Baha'i, white Baha'i, black Baha'i? And you see all that It sounds cute, but what it does is it assumes we're doing what Baha'u'llah said, and we're all loving each other. And it's okay when we're all loving each other. But if we're not, then we got to talk about it. So I could see why she would. I mean, I would say for me, it's white.
Yeah.
But when I described to you the experience I had in the Washington, D.C. area, you know, it's also a very heavy Persian area, Northern Virginia. And I didn't see it so much from the Persian community, but it may have been because I was better known in the area than just the regular Black Baha'is in the area. So I may have been being treated differently. I don't know, but I didn't get that. I didn't generally get that feeling because everybody was just so nice. Everybody was just so nice, but so nice to me.
Yeah.
Now, we you know, in America, if a white person marries a Black person, it generally is a Black man is marrying a white woman.
Right.
When you go on down the line, the fewer things you will find is the white man with a Black woman. That's the same with Persians. Normally, and you're all the opposite. Normally, well, normally it's a Black man who marries a Persian woman. There are more examples of that. More examples of that through the United States. Persian man marrying a Black woman is more unusual. So when you start talking race, there's something to that. There's something to that happening. And we don't really talk about it. And that's why I think this now, thinking about intimate conversation where we could actually say this to each other. We haven't said it to each other. We just kind of let it go over. Like I've even been in a place where somebody says, you know, Black men are marrying white women in the Baha'i faith. And you know, no Persian man is going to marry a Black woman, hardly. Just so few examples of it. Why? Why would that be? If you think there's no prejudice, why would that be? If you think race doesn't make a difference, why would that be?
You know, I think that for one thing, women have more sensitivities to disregard race compared to men. That's why you find white women marrying Black men, and you find rarely, you know, Persian men marrying Black women. In my particular situation, I share with you, you know, it was really a revelation and a God-sent issue. So my situation is totally different in that before meeting Carol, I went through a series of revelations to realize the importance of race unity. So when I met Carol, it was a very totally natural, there was no barrier, if you would, for me to make that decision. But to be honest with you, a few years before that, I thought about it, and I was scared to death to think about it. So if I had not gone through this transformation, I would not have done it. But I'm glad that God helped me, put me through the transformation, and I was able to make that move. So, but even with the American whites in our community, it's very interesting that they are, as you well know, still subconsciously putting barriers and blocks to progress. And I think you have to fight that. You have to push that, because in my own assembly, the only way that I'm able to move an agenda forward is to bring it up, push it forward, push it again, and push it again in a nice way. And, finally, sometimes I succeed. And I frankly, I see that having done that, I have been successful with some members of the community, that they have changed. So since we were talking about, the young lady who spoke before me, as to what we should do or what can we do, I think we have to keep trucking, keep on trucking, keep on doing what we need to do, because that's what Shogi Effendi wants us to do. And he's told us the road is going to be hazardous. It's going to be full of thorns. It's going to be challenging. It's going to be difficult. But he didn't tell us to stop. He's told us to continue.
I'm thinking it's like playing cards. You generally, you know what your cards are. You're looking at them. Another way of, I think, saying what you said is you have to turn these cards out and let people see what you're seeing. What you're seeing. These have been secrets. These have been things we don't talk about.
Right.
And until we talk about them, we don't start to begin to feel like maybe I do need to do something. I can remember when I was saying that the whites do this and the blacks do this. I'm starting looking over here at this, what the blacks do. It's easy to look at what the whites do because it's happening to you all the time. It's not easy to look at what you're doing. And when I was on this National Persian American Affairs Committee, Persians did not want to hear anything about anything being done wrong. And so it was difficult for that. When we would go, and the only place that National Committee went were the places where there was a concentration of Persians. So those were the large areas in America where there were a lot of Persians. What was happening in those areas? The dominant culture of Persia had taken over the Baha'i community. And it was hard to talk about it. We couldn't use these words, intimate conversation, back in that time, because nobody wanted to hear it. Nobody wanted to hear what needs to happen. You know who left the faith a lot? White people. The Persians are taking over. The Persians are taking over. But taking over from the white people. Not from the black people, because we never did have it. So, but we never had this conversation. We never reached a point where we could have this conversation and then figure out, so what can we do about this? And I know Carol is probably pushed to have to do something. A black woman in a heavily Persian community with whites in charge and Persians in charge. And a black person can hardly say anything and be heard. I'm on an assembly. I have to push for just making my voice heard.
I have to say this, man. Over the last 2 years, she has totally changed. She is pushed to a point that now when she talks, everybody listens.
Yes, yes, yes.
You know, before.
That's the beauty of the intimate conversation.
Yes, yes, yes.
You start understanding. Oh, I didn't know why Carol always seemed like she might be mad. Why is Ben mad? I'm not mad. We're just trying to finally reach a place where we can share the conversation.
Thank you, Sohail John. Okay, Hoda John has a hand. Thank you.
I just want to make sure there's nobody else who would like to speak before I say something. I just wanted to respond real quick and share with my good friend Van that we have to look, the Guardian says we have faults, habit, tendencies that we have to weed out, that we have inherited from our nation. He says we have problems. In order to do this work, first thing we have to recognize we do have a problem. We have these attitudes of superiority. It's not just an individual thing. A lot of Persian Baha'i thinks, oh, I have Black friends, or I go shopping in a Black community, or the person who, my kid's teacher is an African-American. They're totally discounting institutionalized race-based prejudice. I would say 95% of the Persian Baha'is have unconscious incompetence. They don't know what they don't know. So they say the things that they don't know in spaces where there's African Americans and whites and etc., because they have not learned the dance as white Americans have known how to dance around people of African descent. They don't know the code. They don't know there's a language. They don't know what they say are microaggressions. So I don't think there's anybody really could say, for example, when you say, okay, racism is not that hard. I've dealt with oppression. I've been beaten. I've been bruised. My aunt was killed in Iran because she was a Baha'i. I know oppression. Just pray a little harder, and you'll feel better. Hold on stronger to the covenant. That's called gaslighting. That means what you feel, what people of African descent have to go through every single day, it's discounted. And just every time sometimes when the Persian friends are in a Zoom having intimate conversation, I'm actually kind of really nervous because what I'm afraid might come out of their mouths, because it's an unrefined, unpracticed language, because they don't know that the things that they're saying, and it's because we haven't studied the Advent of Divine Justice. It was written to the American believers, and it's written in English, and it was translated into Farsi, and which I think takes a while. I can read both. I just think the English one is just, the Guardian is really on point, saying what needs to happen, who needs to do what, and what is the corresponding effort. What do white people, Persian people need to do first before you have a corresponding feeling of what African Americans need to do. What I want to say is those false habit tendencies in our Iranian culture is the fact that image is everything. How things look matters. So it's better you don't see it, don't call it, don't put it out there, don't let it look messy. This is the Baha'i faith. The Baha'i faith has to look perfect. It has to be beautiful. When you say anything about racism, especially, God forbid, if you talk about it in the Baha'i community, you are tarnishing the image of the faith. So I just want to say this is just one practical thing. And also denial, which we know is the heartbeat of racism. If you say that God forbid, as a white American or white passing or white looking or white adjacent person, you have attitudes of superiority that you're working on yourself. Oh my God, Huda, why do you even say that? Don't say that, because you have to be right. You have to say things right. You have to look right. You have to be right. You have to have a good degree. There's so much pressure in the Baha'i community to be right about everything, because image is everything. You don't show the faults and in the little cobwebs and the nooks and crannies. Everything's got to be swept underneath the Persian carpet. So I just think that's another feature that I think it prevents. But if we would, because now we're no longer, we're Iranian Baha'is living in America. And if we are able of wanting to stand up for African Americans, the same way we want our Iranian friends to stand up for what the Baha'is go through in Iran. If we want that from our Iranian friends, we know our African American friends, not just for their sake, but they want it for the growth of the cause. Our faith is not going to grow if 90% of my African American friends have told me, yeah, that they agree with you, Sohail, and they agree with what you said, Carol said. 90% of their hurt comes from Persian Baha'is, because majority of people live in communities where Persians by far outnumber it. I said it, okay? I said it. Because if you don't name it, if you don't claim it, if you do Baha'u'llah's first identify the disease, identify the malady, then prescribe the remedy, for such is the perfect method of a skillful physician. So there's unconscious incompetence, the attitude of superiority, there's anti-Blackness that I've raised with in Iran, in my country. And on top of that, anti-Blackness I've been taught coming to America. It's in every fiber of its society. It's corrosive. It's like this thing that runs through every single pipe, through every single home, every single school, every single path, every single vein and artery of this culture, of this country.
How would we think Persians know this? White people don't even know it here in America.
That's true.
They can't even have the conversation. So it seems, that we do have to have these conversations. We have to have them open, and I'm a lot less inhibited with few people here to say, just from my heart, without worrying what you're going to think. And we haven't gotten to know each other well enough to feel comfortable saying what we feel.
Mm.
And admitting what we don't know. And trying to learn what is right now. You hear critical race theory. Well, it's just to talk about the false history. And do you know what they say in the schools here? That would just be too traumatic for our kids to learn about slavery. Too traumatic. So we're not able. We still haven't gotten to a place where we can just have this conversation, unfiltered, except to try to be as loving and kind as you can when you're trying to express what the problems are and what do we need to do to solve them. So we cannot just pray, because what is the definition of prayer? You have to pray, then act. You have to act. Action is connected to prayer. I see you have a hand, Sherry.
Hi, yes, I have a couple of things that came to my mind. With regards to the Persian Baha'is, I mean, It's the irony of it all, because we have been so racially not treated well as well throughout our history, with the wars, the Islamic Arabic wars, that they came and conquered over Iran. They forced their language, they forced their traditions. So Iran has throughout its history been so marginalized as a nation, as a culture. We are not foreign to this. We have tasted this. We have had this poison in our blood for centuries and generations. So not to be able to feel that, because I have thought about this so much. Why are we acting the way we are? We who have tasted this for so long. I myself in Canada, I grew up here. I have been so many times a target of racism against myself from Canadians, from places that I worked. I've had people I worked with who were Greek, and they marginalized me. They were racial hatred coming toward me. So we have all tasted this. And so for Persians, so the conclusion I reached, which could very well be wrong, is that Persians as a culture are like this with everyone. Not that it's a good thing. I mean, I'm in a community of 850 people. Of the 850 people, we have 12 non-Iranians. Can you imagine? Over 800 and something are all Persians. And when we used to have our feasts, everybody during socialization would gather, and these 10 or 12 people were like lost. Nobody would want to talk to them, because Persians just like to cluster together and talk and laugh, and you know what I mean? And so many times I myself am guilty of that. I used to just jump around and talk to my friends, and I would, from the corner of my eye, I would see how these Canadian Baha'is, they were just left with no one to talk to. And I would then sometimes, when I would be wise enough, I would just tear myself apart from my friends and go reach out to them. But what I'm saying is, I don't know why this is happening here to the Persians who have gone through this poison themselves, who are feeling this every single day. The other conclusion I reached is that maybe because we have all been living in diaspora, and they have all tried to make these countries their home, make it like Iran. I don't know what's going through their heads, honestly. I'm just trying to put all these threads together, but none of this is an excuse. This is really, we are so guilty and so not right, because we have been there. We have been there. I have been there right here in Canada. I've been there many times. I know how horrible it is, how horrible it feels. So how can we not reach out to others and make this go away? It's just beyond me.
Thank you, Sherry, for sharing.
Eugenia is trying to say something.
Miss Eugenia, let me spotlight you.
Hello, Ishan. Thank you. The Gilmer, thank you for this space. Thanks all of you for being here. It's always a pleasure to hear you. I look up to you so much. Just a few days I was talking with Mr. Gilmer. Having meaningful conversations, yeah, does not mean that people are angry. It's our ability to have these spaces, and as we all collectively said, if we cannot have those conversations, where are we? Where can we go? You know, I'm from Barbados originally, and I met a wonderful man that stole my heart. But when I first came to the United States, I saw two worlds. I saw the white world, I saw the Latin world, I saw blacks on one side, and I did not understand it. What I have realized over the years is the majority environment that I grew up in allows me to use it as a platform to represent others, especially African Americans, sharing with them where I pull and where I get that strength from. Every year we have something called a Caribbean International Party. And in 2020, no, 2019, because 2020 was our situation with the coronavirus. We had 130 people come to our home in 33 countries. I mean, every country you could list. And the purpose for that is to force people unconsciously in a space where they're next to someone who doesn't look like them and to interact with them. At first, I'm sure it was intimidated. I would always observe people, you know, but by year two, and now it's been 10 years, they can't wait to come to these parties. Um, but in other spaces, I have been in conversations with whites who, a lot of different people who would say, I'm not racist. We all have that tendency. And so the way I try to tackle that is, how many people of color do you know? And they might say, well, I am scared. What are you scared of? We just have to try. Many years ago, my daughter was 3, and I went to a Kmart store and I saw this guy. He was bald headed, you know, with the tattoos and everything. And he was serving me. And I said, I have a question for you. Can I ask you this question? And it was as though he already anticipated what I was going to ask him. And he goes, yeah. I said, are you what they will call a white supremacist?
Oh.
And yeah. He said, but you know, I am so tired. I'm so tired of the same ideology. And he said, I just want out. I have Black friends. I even have a girlfriend who is in prison, who's Japanese, and I can't wait for her to get out. In the meantime, he looked over at my daughter, who was 3, and he goes, she's mixed. And then he went into all this thing about all of us being mixed. He said, you know, I don't believe in mixture. I go, really? I said, so let's see, you have a Japanese girlfriend that you can't wait to get together with, and you don't believe in mixing? I said, think about that. He goes, I guess you're right. I guess you're right. We became friends. And he took me up to the front, and I hope I'm not dragging this on, but he took me up to the front counter and checked me out, and he told his friends, if this lady ever comes in here, I want you all to help her, because this is my friend. And I go, really? I said, that's good. I left that store and I went to some friends of mine, of course, given the history, some Black friends of mine, and I told them what had happened, and they were wind up. They were like, show us him. Let's take care of him. I said, why? I said, I'm not going to tell you. He didn't do me anything. So again, we're having those dialogues. Another time I've had dialogues with people who met me for the first time, know nothing about me, and they'll be like, you know, my mom used to have a Black lady, and she used to come and clean for us. And I would say, oh, let's see, I have an Indian friend, a Persian friend, a Thai friend, and they'll be like, what? So I'm basically saying, think before things come out of your mouth. Think about how that sounds coming out of your mouth. Or even the fact that people would say, yes, if Black people can just work a little harder, they'll be a lot better. We all know the history of the Tulsa Massacre. We know that there was once a thriving society and now where it is. And so these continuous, meaningful conversations are so important. Thank you.
Excellent share, by the way, Ms. Eugenia. Love it.
Thank you, Isan. Thank you. And thank you again, Mr. Gilmer, and all of you for being in this space. And Hoda, thank you.
I want to share just a 2-second thought. This is an insight from when Sohail Jan was talking. It inspired me. And so this is a long and thorny road. This is the words of the beloved guardian. Long and thorny. One of the words is long. And so it means stay in the ring, people. So it means that, you know, you may have had a conversation before. Oh, I've talked about racism in our community way back when. I don't have racism. Hey, you got to keep at it. You got to keep the conversation going. And this kind of conversation that dear Van was presenting, this is a conversation of the heart. And that's really what it is. It's when two souls conversate at the heart level, and this dance, which it is, it's a dance of love. And I see the whites, the Persians, doing the dance of humility. And that dance of humility, you know, it's almost to say, yes, we have been this, in the sense of the dominant side in the dance, but you take the lead. And so we put out our hand to the minorities in our community and say, you take the lead, and we accompany you. So it is a loving dance of two parties. And in a dance, you have to have a close embrace. And so the dance starts. But often what happens in the dance, one of them drops. And it's often, as what dear Hudajan said, microaggressions, or what Miss Eugenia said, you don't think what you say. And you have this aspect of honesty. Are you still maintaining this posture of humility, this posture of love, this posture of holding close embrace? And this close embrace is that conversation. Because as dear Van said at the very beginning, how many dear friends of African American do you know? Because this is a conversation of how can you embrace anyone if you don't have someone to embrace? And if dear Van said at the very end of his presentation, this is the dependent on the world peace. So if we are not doing this dance, this loving embrace, we are not fulfilling our role as Baha'is. And going back to my little analogy on chess, we have to advance as Persians and whites down that long and thorny road, festered in the battle. And we may say, oh, I'm not a pawn. But yes, we're pawns, because we're the supporters, loving companions to the knights and the bishops. But what happens if a pawn advances all the way across the board? It becomes a queen. And so this is the reality. We have to understand our reality and know that we have to do this dance together, supporting, loving, encouraging. And I share this last insight with my dear Van, because this was one of the hardest things in the whole of the great letter written in 1938. Forget the past. And I just want to share this with one insight with you, dear Van, because I've studied in depth this letter. And I wanted to share this one insight. That was written not to say, forget all the sufferings that have happened. It is to unleash this burden from the heart. That is why, because if you cannot forget the past, the burden of the heart is overwhelming, and we will never be able to spiritually move on from that chapter. So it is out of love. It is out of such supreme love that the beloved guardian said, forget that past, because he loves you. He loves the African Americans. He loves us so much that he says, forget the past, so that you will never be able to move on. But it's not forgive. He didn't say forgive, but he said forget. So that is the reality. I love you, dear Van. Thank you. Profound from our bottom of our heart. And Miss Eugenia, what a pleasure always. So do we have any other hands, or are we getting close to our close? Am I right, Miss Hodajan?
Well, we've only started the conversation.
Oh, yes, that's true.
We have started it. We will continue on for many weeks to come, hoping that as we use the analogy of the chess, I say use the analogy of like the ocean. Baha'u'llah says, that his ocean, we have to immerse ourselves in the ocean. We have ourselves immerse ourselves in the ocean of the reality of our friends of African descent who are pupil of the eye, and that only happens through spontaneous, informal contact, real deep, close friendships, that we would not want anything to happen to them because we have skin in it. We have skin in the game. We have skin in this horrific, nefarious, noxious, pernicious disease of racism that we don't want our African American Baha'i brothers and sisters who we don't want them to be treated any different than the way we want to be treated. That essence is justice. So I see John, and he's married to an Iranian, and his hand is up. I'm so glad he wants to say it.
Thank you, Miss Eugenia. Thank you. So I'm just going to remove spotlight and let us go to dear John. Okay, so, and let's spotlight. There you are. Welcome, John.
Thank you. Thank you, Ehsan and Hoda, and especially to dear Van. Hoda was speaking just now about having the skin in the game, and it made me think of something, because Van put up these two duties and responsibilities that we have. And I think a question I haven't asked enough is, why do this? Like, we have to make this supreme effort. Should I be doing it simply because I was asked to do it? And as I ponder on the necessity and the urgency of it, I realize that those who have lighter skin, in a sense, we are living in this society in a state of deep spiritual peril, because white supremacy has created an environment in which I can do things, think things, and say things that would be abhorrent to Baha'u'llah. They are abhorrent to the Baha'i message and what we are hoping to achieve. And yet, because of this environment, I can be surrounded by people who will not only applaud me for these things, they will encourage. They will make it seem as though this is the right path that I'm walking on. And I may even reach the point of believing this is what God wants me to do. This is what God wants me to think. And what could be more dangerous than that? To be in a situation where you are doing what would be abhorrent to the blessed beauty, and yet believing that this is what God would wish of you. And the other thing I think is a reason to do it, which is that would be more the negative reason, right? The severe danger that we're in that we should never neglect. The positive reason is that something was taken from us by this culture of white supremacy. And that was all of these friends of ours that we would not know or did not know, because we've created this separation in our hearts, the suspicion, the distrust, the misestimation. And that this really is like the great treasure. What is the most bountiful thing that the earth has to offer? It is humanity. And so it is in the hearts and the souls of other individuals that we may come to know that we will find those reflections of God's names and attributes. But if the people of African descent, if the people of the eye are taken out of my life, I don't even realize the state of poverty that I'm living in. And so I think that there's a deep necessity to this duty, this supreme effort. And it's interesting that it's an effort on one side and a response to that effort on the other side. But this effort is really, I think, it's essential. It's imperative. So I just wanted to, that's what came to my mind as Hoda was speaking.
So Van, help us, take us out on your last parting words and your thoughts, your advice.
Well, I was thinking about how we can learn and how long that learning can last. In America, the whole this whole thing about racism has been so deeply embedded that even those of us who are here haven't grasped fully how it has affected us. Now, I said I became a Baha'i 55 years ago. I'm going to try this. The Persian man in my life 55 years ago, we used to sit around the table 3 Black people, 2 white people, and a Persian. And we would do a number of things. And this is after what they were telling us was a fireside, and then we would sit around and we eat and just enjoy getting to know each other, building very strong and loving friendships. So Faradun, early in my life, taught me this. I have not even sung it anywhere. So I'm going to try recalling the words and the music from 54 years ago, from just by rote, trying to learn this little piece of Persia. The song is in Marad Jean Bouye Abdul Baha Shabad Rashke Der Bouye Abdul Baha. Now, I don't know if I got words right, but I'm telling you that piece 54 years ago, around a table of friends trying to learn to know each other. That's the missing part. Now, us sitting around the table trying to get to know each other, learning about each other, sharing our cultures with each other. We used to sit and have a saucer with a cup in it and put tea, and it would say, "I'm going to teach you how to drink the tea like we do in Persia, in Iran." And they pour the tea in the saucer, and they say, "You take this saucer and you." Now you'll know if that's true. But I'm telling you, and the only reason I tell you this is that when we learn it, we can maintain it. If we don't allow ourselves to learn it, we'll never be able to carry it forward. And so in my life, even when I talk to Persians about now things that you might do that get in the way of our coming together, I can tell you what we could do that bring us together. And it's a lasting piece of learning. So I think if you all are pushing at this intimate conversation, it's what we've got to move up to now. Not blaming, not complaining, but just taking the model that Shoghi Effendi has given us and working it. Not just saying it, working it. And I think that's where if we fall down at all, it's just thinking that because it was written and it was said, and we said we follow that we're actually doing it. So yes, we're one human family, but we're only one human family when we start working with each other to become that. And we all signed up for this. We signed up for this. So we can't just coast. And we've got so many obstacles. Thank God, Abdu'l Baha and Shoghi Effendi concentrated on this country, America. And it has things that are wrong with it. And you can help us to fix this. White people can help us to fix this. The other night I did something with a close white friend. He happens not to be a Baha'i. And we talk every day. We write every day. And he has a family and he has all kinds of other obligations. But he just wrote to me while I'm talking to you, why can't I get to my best black friend? He doesn't know I'm on Zoom with all of you. So I appreciate your invitation, even though it came very close to when I thought, oh, I've got too much on my plate to do this.
Yeah.
But I'm happy to be with you. And I admire that there's a place on Facebook that says Iranians for social justice.
Thank you.
Racial justice.
Dear Van, it's been truly our pleasure. And let me thank you, John. It was excellent insights. I just want to share, there was 3 reasons that I could outline the top of my head when you asked the question. One of them is obedience. Straight up obedience. Number 2 is sense of urgency. We got to feel. We got to have that feeling of urgency. The problem is the world has this, it's urgent. We see blood in our streets, literally. Our Baha'i communities are probably more disunified. We have to have that sense of urgency. When dear Van was reading about world peace, we have to feel this. This is a reality that if we want to work as Baha'is towards that goal, this is what we got to do. The third one is love. We got to love our brothers and sisters. So we have to have love. And this transcends the aspect when dear Van was saying all those beautiful adverbs in front of it, genuine love, consummate, tact and patience. So all of those, is our actions pure? Or are we just trying to have some conversation, and just kind of do the work, but try to get by? Or are we truly trying to create veritable friendships? Veritable means true, just like dear Van with his dear friend, Mr. Bundy, that's a true friendship. That's love. It transcends words and names and syllables. It's love, right? So that is the reality. How can we create, love between hearts? That's what the faith means. And I'm going to unspotlight you, my dear friend John, because we got a special guest just joined us. Our co-collaborator, Barbara Talley's in the house. So, Miss Barbara Talley, do you have any words to share? We love you. So you have the floor. Feel free to unmute yourself, Miss Barbara.
As she's probably double tasking.
She's triple tasking. If you know Barbara,
quadruple. She's running the conference next weekend, which is the 3rd conference for the pupil of the eye, and there's so many moving pieces. And she's I'm sure she's doing so many things at the same time.
She's a blessed soul. She's quadruple tasking. She's all over. We love Barbara. So anyway, if she happens to unmute herself in the next few minutes, we love to hear from you, Miss Barbara Talley. And dear Van, it has been a pleasure. It has been an honor.
Thank you.
We love you and want to give a shout out to Ms. Hodas for creating such a page. Yeah. And this is a platform for all the friends to walk this path together, and as Persians, as Iranians, as whites, to collaborate, to support, to accompany and understand our role, and to encourage, nurture, and support African Americans. We love you, dear Van. Thank you so much. Thank you. And Miss Barbara, are you still with us? You want us to give a shout out?
Love you all.
She's still busy. Anyway, feel free to unmute yourself and give some love to Van.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Van.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Van.
much, Van.
Thank you. It's good to be
Bye.
here.
Thank you. It was such a
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. This was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hoda, and thank you, Ehsan Khan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Van. Allah. Thank you all for coming.
I love.
Bye.
Wonderful.
Bye-bye.
Van, if your only accomplishment in this whole world of life was that in this day, Baha'u'llah, I would say you have fulfilled it, because that was so beautiful.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you.
Van, I have to tell you a very quick story, very quick.
Yes.
You know, Freydun Jalali and his family lived upstairs in the same house as we did.
What?
Yes. And his mother, her name was Maulud Khanum. Maulud.
Uh-huh.
When I was born, I couldn't pronounce her name. So instead of saying Maulud Khanum, I would say Nokholulu. That was my name for his mother.
Oh,
But yeah, I have been in touch with them. You know, do you know if his mother is still alive?
I think she died not that long ago, though.
Okay, because I knew she was there a few years ago.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I've been more recently talking to Ferdinand and Ann.
Uh-huh. Great. Yeah.
We're re-meeting.
Yeah.
It's been a long time that we haven't talked to each other.
Yeah. Ask him about the Mansour family.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
he'll remember.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And
Now,
thank you.
I
Hoda.
didn't expect that coming from nowhere from you, you know? What, Freydun?
Yeah.
But you know, the Baha'is, Persian Baha'is in the 60s and early 70s were of a different breed than the ones today. And I'm not really putting down anybody here, but in those days, I remember one of my good friends who was a few years older than me. He finished high school before I did, and he came to the US. And after about 9 months of going to college, he came right back to Iran. And I said, Vahid, why are you back? He said, I want to take the summer school here and take a lot of Baha'i courses, because my knowledge is extremely limited compared to the knowledge of the American Baha'is.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you all probably know him, Vahid Alavian. His father was one of the martyrs, but Vahid, we played soccer together, in Iran. But yeah, I mean, and the other thing about the Persians in America is that the majority of the American Baha'i population is Persian.
Yeah.
That is a reality. So anyway, I didn't want to take up any more of your time with shop talk.
Well, good to see you. I haven't seen you in a long
Good to
while.
see you. I know, it's been at least a couple of years.
Yeah. When you over here.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I see that Dr. Listra Lloyd, her camera is on. I just want to say Allahu Akbar, and thank you so much for listening and being part of the conversation. I haven't
Allahu Akbar.
Allah.
It was very enlightening. I agreed with everything.
Oh,
And,
Oh, wow.
great.
yeah, so I enjoyed the program.
Oh, great.
Yeah, that was a great program. We just got to bring
And
more people.
I wanted to say that I'm in Tucson, Arizona, and we're actually studying Book 13 for social action, and we have a Baha'is for Race Unity group that we put on events every month and talk to Baha'is, especially white Baha'is, pretty much, to educate about this country and how we've been sort of indoctrinated in this culture of racism. and you know, and so forth. So you guys said it all. It was wonderful.
Great, great, great.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good
Bye
night.
bye.
Thank
Bye-bye,
you so
everybody.
much, dear Van. Thank you,
Oh,
every
Dr.
one of you.
Good to meet you too. I've been seeing
Yeah.
your name and I've been reading your stuff.
Thank you. Thank you. Pleasure. Pleasure. All right.
You did such a wonderful job, Ehsan John. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.